Introducing number 4, aka the Seance, aka Klaus Hargreeves. The Joker, the addict, the victim, the hero. This is Klaus Explained. Klaus is a lot of things. He is uninhibited and unconventional. He's an extrovert and is definitely the funniest of the Hargreeves children, often serving as the show's comic relief. He is irreverent, doesn't respect authority or take crap from anyone.
I'd like to apologize that you are depriving some village of their idiot!
All of these qualities make Klaus really endearing and fun to watch, but they also make him a pain in the neck for those around him. Klaus uses his humor to deflect, avoiding painful memories and anything he finds hard or boring. This is great for when a heavy moment needs to be lightened, like in this scene when he tries to cheer up a drunk and depressed Luther, or when antagonizing his kidnappers, laughing in their faces as they try to waterboard him and fail.
I needed that.
But when you can't take anything seriously, especially when the goal is to save the world from impending doom, this is a less than helpful characteristic. Because Klaus doesn't seem to take life seriously, no one in his family takes him seriously.
What are you still doing here?
What? I need an excuse to hang out with my family?
Well, no, so we're trying to have a serious conversation.
What? And I'm incapable of being serious? Is that what you're saying?
Luther's got a point. You should get out.
So rather than being included, he finds himself on the outside. Klaus's irreverence makes him an effective accomplice. In this scene, Klaus helps Five get confidential information out of a shady doctor at the Meritech Corporation.
I want it. Name, please, now.
You're crazy.
You got no idea.
Look, the next step is full-scale psychological warfare, right? You gotta act like you got this tick, right? Like the army did this experiment on you, right? That just went terribly wrong. You be like, back up! Back up! Mind your business, that's all. Mind your business.
Klaus succeeds where others would fail because he's not afraid to use unconventional methods, like spontaneous violent blackmail. Klaus's recklessness can be a problem, but can at times make him a fearless hero. But Klaus is also a malignant nihilist. It's not just that he doesn't care about authority or your rules, man. He doesn't care about anything. This causes problems in his life. He has no job, no friends, and no purpose. He simply drifts from one high to the next. Klaus is an addict. He abuses drugs in an effort to silence the voices of the dead who haunt him. Throughout the series, we witness various moments of Klaus recoiling from the screams of the dead. And it's kind of easy to sympathize with him. If we were cursed with his powers, we might want to numb ourselves too. In episode 4, we discover that Klaus isn't just haunted by the dead, but by traumatic memories that break into his consciousness like intrusive thoughts. As a child, Klaus was terrified of the dead, which is understandable when the dead look like this. In order to desensitize Klaus to this fear, Reginald Hargreeves locked him in the mausoleum for hours at a time. Hargreeves believed that by exposing Klaus to his fears, he would become stronger in response and his powers would grow. Hargreeves was probably attempting exposure therapy, a type of behavioral therapy developed in the 1950s by South African psychiatrist Joseph Volpe. It was a revolutionary way of treating phobias and anxiety. Exposure therapy typically works by establishing a hierarchy of feared objects or scenarios and exposing a patient to them. The patient is armed with relaxation techniques and faces the weakest version of their fear first. Like if you were afraid of spiders, you would start by sitting in a room with a spider. As your fear reduced, you would move closer to the spider until eventually you were chilling with a spider. Although different types of exposure therapy have been developed over the years, some are more extreme than others, like implosion therapy, otherwise known as flooding. Flooding was invented in the late 60s by psychologist Thomas Damphel. Flooding is really hardcore. It involves exposing a patient to the scariest version of their fear first. So rather than sitting across the room from a spider, you would start by holding the spider. Or maybe even sit in a room full of spiders until you calmed down and your body learned that the spiders couldn't hurt you. Flooding isn't for everybody, and although exposure therapy works, it has to be conducted carefully and ethically, especially when it comes to children, which isn't really something Reginald Hargreeves cared much about. His version of this therapy was really extreme, which for Klaus meant being trapped alone in a room full of dead bodies and their ghosts. You see, Reginald Hargreeves is the type of dad who teaches their kid how to swim by just throwing them in the lake.
Why not?
I can't swim.
You can't what?
I can't swim.
How old are you?
6.
Maybe Hargreeves was doing the best he could to help Klaus deal with his powers, but whatever his intentions, his cruel form of therapy didn't work. Instead, Klaus was traumatized, and as a result spent his life trying to escape from the memories of the mausoleum through chronic substance abuse and silly outfits. After stealing Hazel and Cha-Cha's time-traveling briefcase, Klaus accidentally transports himself back in time to Vietnam during the height of the war, where he meets his love interest Dave. Dave is classically handsome, kind, honest, and brave. He represents everything that Klaus isn't. Opposites attract, the two fall in love, and Klaus stays in the past in order to be with him. The Vietnam War was a long and bloody conflict. And of those who survived it, many suffered from PTSD because of their experiences in the war. Somehow for Klaus, Dave made the harsh reality of war bearable. Klaus was willing to stay as long as they were together. After Dave's tragic death on the front lines, Klaus returns to the present and struggles with feelings of grief. He shows signs of PTSD, experiencing jarring flashbacks to the war, similar to the flashbacks he has of the haunted mausoleum. But unlike those traumatic childhood memories, Klaus doesn't turn to drugs to block them out. Although he may want to continue his familiar self-destructive pattern,
I want to be numb again.
he stays sober in the hopes of conjuring and seeing Dave again. This whole experience teaches Klaus a lesson, that although life is full of suffering, and we might be tempted to numb ourselves to it with drugs and hedonistic annihilation, we may only end up numbing ourselves to all the good things. Things that make life worth living. Things like love. By the final battle, Klaus has maintained his sobriety despite all the suffering it brings him. This allows him to fully conjure the spirit of his brother Ben, who wields his weird octopus powers to defend their family. In the show, Klaus's powers function as a metaphor, where the spirits of the dead who force themselves into his consciousness symbolize the difficult memories of the past. Memories that won't stay dead and buried but are instead resurrected, intruding painfully into his mind, preventing him from leading a happy and healthy life. Klaus's life is a hard one, but there is hope for him. By staying sober and facing his past, Klaus can take control of his history, and rather than being a victim of his past, he can become the hero of his story.